We're going to enforce those laws. And how dare Mayor Lucas invite criminal behavior into our state and make this problem worse rather than getting behind efforts to enforce the laws on the books. If Quinton Lucas doesn't like the laws, he needs to get those laws changed.
Welcome to the Bailey Wire Podcast, where we open the files on the biggest legal stories in Missouri. We'll explore what these issues mean in simple terms, how they impact you, and give insight into the actions by the Missouri Attorney General's office. Here's your host, Brandon Rathard.
A lot of folks call it modern-day slavery. Welcome to the Bailey Wire Podcast. I'm Brandon Rathard, joined by Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Recently, a big event in Springfield where we talked about some incredible efforts that have been taking place in the Missouri Attorney General's office as it relates to our anti-human trafficking efforts. Let's start here, Mr. Bailey. What exactly is the role of the Attorney General's office when it comes to human trafficking in Missouri?
Well, ever since January 1st of this year, the Attorney General's office has taken a leadership role on combating this issue. There was previously a task force that was under the legislature that expired on December 31st of last year, and so that mantle of responsibility has been handed off to the Attorney General's office, and we intend to increase training, increase visibility, increase prosecution statewide on this issue, and we've already begun those efforts. We're excited to have rolled that out, get it in the public domain, and get people focused on this issue. Again, we've done some work in the past. We have a lot of work we still need to do to combat this issue.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have somebody in the office who has his efforts have been remarkable, and you have conversations with him about all the interested stakeholders, because we might think typically prosecutors and law enforcement, but there's a lot of different agencies that are involved with trying to combat human trafficking in Missouri.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's important. We talk about enforcement, and that's detection, investigation, prosecution, and then ultimately getting the bad actors to the Department of Corrections for punishment. But we need to keep our focus on the victims. And victims have rights under state statute and the Missouri State Constitution, and we got to be there to support those victims. And that's so many of these stakeholder groups actually are victim advocacy groups. Child advocacy centers play a key role in not only supporting the children who are victimized under these crimes, but also helping develop forensic evidence for law enforcement investigators and ultimately prosecutors. So, wrapping our arms around the victims and understanding what victim services are available and making sure that those individuals are educated and empowered to be able to provide victim services is really critical as well.
And we talk about it being, it's a form of modern day slavery. I mean, think about this for a second, Mr. Bailey. You are owned, regardless of the type of trafficking it is. It's in effect, it's another human being that owns and controls every single thing that you do. And on a human element, I can't even imagine the pain that's involved with something like that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, when you look at the wheel of power and control and you have a relationship where the power dynamic is so disproportionate, you've got one person that wields this enormous influence over someone's life. And maybe it's somebody that the victim trusted at first, but then abused that trust and isolated that victim to a point that they were completely dependent upon the perpetrator for everything, for their food, their shelter, their clothing. And so that when you have that kind of dynamic, it is hard for individuals to alone break out of that wheel of power and control that's being exercised against them. And so certainly that's almost impossible for children who can't even cognitively recognize that they're trapped in that cycle. And so, being able to detect those warning signs that when the relationship exists and it exposes itself in the public domain, because you don't necessarily see, you're not going to. The perpetrators work hard to conceal what they're doing, but there are certain things that trained individuals can detect. And when you see that in the public domain, at a truck stop, at the Walmart, in public places, we need to report that to law enforcement and get a trained professional to look at that and ensure that we can provide safety for those victims.
Folks in the healthcare industry, nurses and doctors, there's training happening with them, too, to help them realize some of these things that, hey, there might be a victim of human trafficking in this situation. Do you get the sense that there's a lot of people in Missouri that think, human trafficking, that doesn't really happen here. It doesn't happen in the Midwest. Do you get the sense that there is a lot? Now, we know it happens. We're in the Attorney General's office, but do you get that sense, and why do people think that, I wonder?
Well, I think it's tough for people to realize the nadir of human depravity that is involved in this type of offense. Like you said, it's a form of modern-day slavery, and it's tough for people in 2024 to realize that that's happening. But what we need to understand is that the crisis at our southern border, that's the direct result of the president's refusal to enforce the laws on the books, has resulted in more criminal aliens entering this country than the entire population of our state. And that's increased the number of fentanyl deaths in the state of Missouri, and it's increased the amount of human trafficking that's going on. More than 1,100 instances reported of human trafficking. So think of how many go undetected or unreported. And that's caused Missouri to rank 4th highest in the nation for a number of incidences of human trafficking. That's why this is such a critical issue to address today, that we've got to get our arms around it. We've got to investigate and prosecute the wrongdoers. We've got to keep the pressure up on the federal government to close the southern border and enforce the laws on the immigration laws on the books to protect Missourians and Missouri the people of the state of Missouri.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about illegal immigration here in a minute, but I can assure you that human trafficking is happening in Missouri. Last year, 5 Springfield and Branson area residents sentenced for child exploitation, an enterprise that they were doing in Pulaski County. There was a case out of there, and then kind of a high-profile case out of St. Charles County, an Indian man who was not involved in sex trafficking, but he was being trafficked. He was owned by other human beings, being forced to do work he didn't want to do. And you talk about the depravity in this case, even though we always think it's sex trafficking, and it's not just that, I can assure you. So it is happening in Missouri. And we talk about the influx of illegal immigrants in America, and it's happening in Missouri. And if you're willing to, you want to talk about a recent letter you sent to the mayor of Kansas City, Mayor Quinton Lucas.
Yeah, look, Mayor Lucas has invited the Biden administration to resettle criminal aliens in Kansas City in order to find jobs for them in Kansas City. And my point is, number one, that's illegal. It is a criminal offense to knowingly transport illegal aliens into or through the state of Missouri. Number two, it's illegal to hire undocumented workers. That's not fair to working Missouri families who need those jobs. And we should be worried about working Missouri families, not people that came here illegally. We should be putting working Missouri families and Americans first. But then beyond that, the Attorney General's office has authority to sanction any business who knowingly hires illegal aliens and undocumented workers. And we're going to enforce those laws. And how dare Mayor Lucas invite criminal behavior into our state and make this problem worse rather than getting behind efforts to enforce the laws on the books. If Quinton Lucas doesn't like the laws, he needs to get those laws changed, not aid in the invasion at the southern border and create an incentive for individuals to come to Missouri and violate Missouri statutes.
All right, this is the Bailey Wire. I'm Brandon Rather, along with Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey. And you know something about this topic. Earlier this year, you were summoned to Washington, D.C. and asked to testify as it relates to illegal immigration and the border policies that have been enacted by the current administration. Why is somebody listening right now? Because and it's illegal immigration. I want to be clear here. I don't think anybody's against immigration. I don't think that's happening at all. We're talking about illegal immigration. What are the impacts of illegal immigration on Missourians? Because we all have love in our hearts. We want to be kind and do everything to help our fellow man. But there's a reality on some of these things.
Well, and there's a direct human toll. Again, when you allow criminal aliens to unlawfully enter the United States of America, what you get is increased fentanyl, increased deaths from fentanyl, increased human trafficking. And those are that we're not solving some humanitarian crisis by throwing open our borders and ignoring our laws. We're creating a crisis of epic proportion. There's been more illegal border crossings under the Biden administration than the entire population of the state of Missouri. It's making Missouri communities less safe. And when I testified in Congress in the proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas, I made clear the number of deaths that Missouri experiences in 1 year from fentanyl exposure, the number of innocent children who have died because of accidental exposure to fentanyl, the number of instances of human trafficking, the cost to the state of Missouri in public services that have to step up to accommodate people that have no legal right to be here. And so, at the end of the day, President Biden has perverted the law to create a catch and release program and a visa program never authorized by Congress. And he's had to bend the plain text of the law to achieve that objective. So rather than using the tools on the books to reduce illegal border crossings, he's invited illegal border crossings and exacerbated the problem. President Trump used the tools on the books to reduce illegal border crossings by 90%. Immigration law is largely unchanged in the past 40 years. So we know the tools exist because President Trump proved it. And what we see time and time again is President Biden taking the wrong policy positions, refusing to enforce the laws as written, and harassing, delaying the process of finishing building the border wall, and actually, in many instances, perverting the law to create visa programs never authorized by Congress.
And you talk about the impact on, in effect, the social services in Missouri. And listen, if our economy was flush and everybody was overflowing with cash in the bank account, folks might be more willing to, sure, we'll pay for this, we'll pay for that. But I think the fact is Missourians' hard-earned money, taxpayer dollars, are the burden on taxpayers. It's astounding what happens when you, and I don't care how good of a person that you are. Again, I believe we're all kind-hearted people. I believe that about most of us, Attorney General. But there is only so much before, in effect, the system breaks. Maybe, and I'm talking specifically, financials for feeding and housing. We have Missourians that need help with, food and housing. We've seen problems in Denver, Chicago, New York City, all across America because illegal immigrants are invited in, and this is a real problem, especially in the economy that we've had for the past several years.
Yeah, and I would, to the folks on the other side of the issue, I would say there is nothing kind-hearted about inviting child trafficking, sex trafficking, and fentanyl dealers into the state of Missouri and making Missouri taxpayers pay the consequences.
All right, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey here on the Bailey Wire. Before we wrap up this latest episode, is there anything else that you would like to add? I know we've talked about some very important topics on this episode of the show. We've talked about illegal immigration. We've talked about some of our anti-human trafficking efforts. And to an extent, those kind of go hand in hand, as you said.
Yeah, they absolutely. There's a direct correlation from Biden's failure and refusal to secure our national sovereignty at the southern border to the harms we're seeing in human trafficking in the state of Missouri. And so not only are we going to address the issue at the root cause, which is going to force the lawsuits we have against the Biden administration to force him to do his job and enforce the laws at our southern border, but we're going to enforce it on the back end as well and hold accountable any wrongdoer who is knowingly transporting criminal aliens into or through the state of Missouri, sanctioning businesses that hire undocumented workers to eliminate that economic incentive for criminal aliens to migrate to the state of Missouri, and protect Missourians.
It's about enforcing the law. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Bailey Wire. Until next time, we'll see you.